New faces, new debates, every single week.
Let me say something that absolutely can't be debated.
It's time for Fight Night with Alex Strouf.
Welcome into another edition of Fight Night. I'm Alex Strouf. On Monday, we posed the question, is there a team to beat other than the Saints in the NFC? Because, the Saints locked up the number one seed, and they're really freaking good at football. We got a ton of responses, a lot of good ones, and this week I decided to bring in none other than the young blood, who is a big Seahawks fan, from Lewis, Delaware, Mr. Michael Bollig. Michael, how are you, my friend?
Great, man. I'm ready to beat you. It's going to be fun.
He's confident as hell, and that's scary. So, Michael, you said maybe not the Rams, maybe not the Bears, but the Seahawks are actually another team to beat. Tell me why.
Well, we've been playing a lot of playoff teams already in the regular season. We've beaten a bunch of them, and we've only lost in a couple of them by, like, one possession, like the Rams. Rams came back in both games that they beat us in. Chargers, we were down at the 1 yard line against with the last play of the game. Then we also beat the Chiefs, Cowboys, Vikings, all playoff teams probably, and then also Cowboys. So we can beat anyone. We can also lose to anyone like the 49ers, but at least we don't have to play them in the playoff time. So that's a good part. But also, when you look at what teams win the Super Bowl, you look at well-balanced teams that play defense, play offense, and the Seahawks do both of them very well. Number 6 in scoring offense and number 11 in scoring defense. So they're a well-balanced team. They love running the ball. Chris Carson's having an unbelievable year. Russell Wilson is protecting the ball. Although we don't have like a great offensive line, it's improved since the last couple of years. And, I mean, when you look at turnover differential, we're number one. We're number one in turnover differential. And we got a good punter who can pin opponents down.
That's what we're talking about. Special teams, baby.
I mean, if you can win field position battle, we're going to win these games. We're going to have the ball like at the 50-yard line, a bunch of our drives starting at the 50-yard line. We only got to drive down 50 yards. We're going to do it. And then also, when you look at playoff performances in the past 5 years, which is like when Russell Wilson was drafted into the league, we got the 4th best winning percentage out of any team with 70% win percentage. That's a good win percentage. And Russell Wilson, as I said, is a winner come late in the season. And then when you think about Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson connection, they got a perfect QBR this season. The last time that's happened was 2009 with the Saints with Drew Brees and Robert Meacham, and they won the Super Bowl. Ooh. History repeats itself. Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl.
Oh, so you're not even saying they're the team to beat. They're going to go all the way. I like the confident fandom. But look, you brought up big games that maybe could go either way. You look at teams like the Rams who play both sides of the ball. Maybe not defensive terrifically, but they do have the defensive player of the year in Aaron Donald. At least I think he'll win. I think he'll beat out Khalil Mack. I said that last week. Yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, the defense is good enough and the offense is super high-powered. We know that about a division rival in L.A. You look at teams elsewhere in the NFC. Chicago, very good defense, not so good offense. I would take Seattle over them. I honestly would. I think Seattle's a very good football team who's been underrated this season. However, I don't see a team touching the Saints unless they are L.A. Because the Saints, I mean, this offense is so high-powered. The defense is good enough. They have a guy named Cameron Jordan who's got a lot of sacks. I think it's 12 or 13 on the season. The defense is definitely good enough and to win football games. They held a team like LA to 25 points when they beat them 35 or 35 to 25 earlier in the season, week 9, I believe it was, because it was LA's first loss. The team is good enough. I mean, you look at Drew Brees and Michael Thomas. If we're going to talk about good quarterback to wide receiver connections, that might be one of the best in the league. And elsewhere, I'll admit it, the Saints don't have a ton of wide receivers. That's why they were looking for guys like Des Bryant, Brandon Marshall to bring them in. I mean, the second and third wide receiver on their team are Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. I mean, they're running backs. But the Saints offense still finds ways to put up points. You got a guy like Alvin Kamara who's over 1,500 yards all-purpose. You got a guy like Drew Brees who's just had a historic season career-wise and even season-wise. I mean, this guy has been putting up records all year long, and he's been absolutely terrific. He'll take second place in the MVP voting. I think this team is top-notch in the NFC, though I might even agree with you. I might concede. I think Seattle might be a sleeper team, though I don't know if they're even the second or third team that I'd look at in the NFC, just being a wild card team, not having home field advantage. It's really hard to play in Seattle, but Seattle won't be playing in Seattle unless they somehow face the 6th seed, whoever that may be, either Philadelphia or Minnesota in the NFC Championship game, which likely won't be happening. But a team like Chicago, a team like Dallas, yeah, I could see Seattle probably going in there and pulling an upset. But LA and New Orleans, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. We might be a season out.
Well, we barely lost to the Rams both times, and we know how hard it is to beat a good team 3 times in a season.
That's true.
It's difficult, especially when Seattle tested them in both of those previous games. And then also the Saints. Drew Brees has had historical season, but he's had bad games as well. Versus the Bucks one time, 201 yards passing. Panthers, 203 yards passing. Cowboys, 127 yards. Vikings, 120. Ravens, 212. Giants, 217. Browns, 243. Those aren't that good of games.
Right.
He's had a bunch of bad games. So, and then he's also had a bunch of games where he doesn't even pass for a touchdown, like the Giants game, like the Bucks, like the Panthers game, and then a bunch of games that were like 1 touchdown thrown. He's had some inflated games, like he gets these 350 plus passing yards or 225 or less passing yards. And if the Seahawks can hold him in check under 250, I think that they have a great chance of beating the Saints. And then also Saints aren't unbeatable. They've played some games that are like one possession games. Like they lost to the Bucks, they struggled against the Browns, and those were home games. And then they barely beat the Falcons in overtime. They struggled against the Giants. Drew Brees struggled a lot against the Giants. They beat the Ravens because of the damn missed extra point. I mean, they lost to the Cowboys. Seahawks beat the Cowboys, so there's that. And then they struggled to score points against the Panthers. I think they scored 12 points against the Panthers. And then they barely beat the Steelers this week because of a fumble. I mean, they could easily be like 9-7 on those games that they've struggled in.
Right. I think you can make that case for just about any team in the league. I mean, you brought up first, the game logs for Drew Brees. You were saying, he's had some bad games. But look, so is Russell Wilson. I mean, it's just a fact that's going to happen. It's a 16-game season. It's going to happen. You look at a game where they played in Arizona, the Seahawks did, and they won just 20-17 on Russell Wilson throwing for 172, no touchdowns. You look at other games, at LA the first time, a game Seattle probably should have won. He only put up 176 yards, but 3 touchdowns to go along with that. So still not a shabby day at the office for Russ. But, I mean, you have games where you're under 200 yards, and those are sometimes Russell Wilson's best games, which is very convenient. San Francisco, and they won 43-16. He threw for 185 and 4 touchdowns.
I'll take that.
Exactly. But, that game against Minnesota is one that really jumps out to me. 72 yards, no touchdown, and interception, and they still came out alive. That shows a good team. That shows a good team. And Seattle's clearly that. As I mentioned, I think they are underrated, but I don't think they stack up against LA. It is very hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. I don't know how often that's been done. The last time I can remember was I think Green Bay beat Chicago 3 times in their Super Bowl season back in the 2010-11 season, where they matched up in the NFC Championship game as well to go with those first 2 games in the regular season. But nonetheless, I do think Seattle has the chance to be good enough. I just don't think they're there. Like I said, I think they're a season out because that defense is rebuilding. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year for Seattle. So they deserve all the praise in the world. but I don't think they're Super Bowl ready like you think. I love the confidence. They're not Super Bowl ready. LA might not even be Super Bowl ready. New Orleans is because they've been there before. They have the veteran leadership to do so. Seattle does as well. I mean, Russell Wilson, he's got a Super Bowl MVP under
Russell Wilson is
the
the only quarterback that can match up against Drew Brees and the best quarterbacks in the NFC. I don't trust Trubisky. I don't trust Goff. We've seen what Goff's done the last couple games. I don't trust Dak Prescott, and I don't trust Foles or Kirk Cousins, whoever that succeeds.
I'll stop you there. I agree with you on the first half. I think Goff is probably the best option outside of Wilson and Brees because experience trumps all. That's just truth when it comes to January in the NFL. However, you look at a guy like Nick Foles, who's been absolutely terrific, won Super Bowl MVP last year. I think if Philadelphia gets into the playoffs, they become a dark horse. They've also had an underrated season because it started off so roller coastery and sloppy, and they were losing football games they shouldn't have. But Philadelphia is still the reigning Super Bowl champions. They've all been there just about. I mean, just about that whole team was there last year and has a ring on their finger. They're still hungry to go do it again. I think if Philadelphia sneaks in, they become scary. They would play, as of now, it'd be the Bears in the first round. I think likely that's what it's going to be because I think LA plays who? Arizona or San Francisco? They're going to win that game. So I think it becomes, it would be the Bears and whoever the 6th seed is. If it's Eagles-Bears, I'll probably take the Eagles. However, it's Cowboys-Seahawks in Dallas, I'd probably take the Seahawks as well. You take those underrated seeds because, look, these are better football teams overall. I mean, Seattle has an offense that Chicago doesn't, and Philadelphia has experience and firepower that I had that backwards, that Chicago doesn't, and Seattle has a lot more going for them than Dallas does. But, it was a close game earlier in the year. We can see how things have changed over time. Nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. My point here is, Mike, is that Seattle, it was supposed to be a rebuilding year. It still is a rebuilding year. It's just a really good rebuilding year. It's kind of like Green Bay of the past, just using my frame of reference, when they're kind of down in the dumps, probably shouldn't have been a 10 or 11 win year, and then they go out and they make the NFC Championship game like they did, I believe it was 2015, where they got blown out by Atlanta. So let's get to final round. Let's wrap this all into one little take. I mean, we're pretty much in agreement to a point. You think they're Super Bowl ready. I clearly don't. Give me your last thing right here in final take.
Well, Seahawks, like I said, they got defense and offense. They got a really young, talented secondary, and it runs through Shaquille Griffin. Trey Flowers, he was supposed to be undrafted this year. He was taken in the 5th round by us, and he's had a really good season. I believe he is 3rd in tackles for our team. Bradley McDougald is probably our veteran in that secondary. He's in his 6th year. He's had 3 interceptions. Frank Clark is 8th in the league with sacks, so he's getting to the quarterback, which I love. And then we got a 3-headed monster in the rushing attack. Chris Carson having over 1,000 yards rushing this year after him getting injured last year. And then we got Rashad Penny. Although it's been a disappointing year, he's been actually adequate the last few weeks. And then Mike Davis as well. And when you have 3-headed rushing attack, that could be deadly come playoff time. I feel like we're one of the most complete teams this year. Although we might not have been the favorites to start the year, Pete Carroll got this team ready and has performed very well since week 2 after that 0-2 start. I love this team. I think we got a great chance of making it far in the playoffs.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you. However, you look at New Orleans, they've been full of really tough teams all year. When Washington was rolling week 5, they knocked them off in dominating fashion on Monday Night Football. You look at teams like Minnesota, they take care of business there. They knock off Baltimore. Teams like Philadelphia, they blow out. Teams like the Rams, they gave them their first loss of the season in a really good game, 45-35. I think I said 35-25 earlier. I'd like to change that. So let me fix that first and foremost. But otherwise, I mean, the only really tough loss we see in the New Orleans season, at least as of recently, obviously they had a couple tough ones earlier in the year. But I look at that loss a couple weeks ago to Dallas. That's one that really sticks out. It was a 13-10 game, not very pretty. but this team is again on a roll. They're again putting up yards. They're 6th in the league for yards per game. They're 10th in the league for rush yards per game. They're 2nd in the league for points per game. They're out first downing their opponents, if that makes sense. They're better on third down conversions. They're better on yards by a large margin. They're +9 in a turnover ratio. They're dominating time of possession. They've had 58 touchdowns on the year. That's, I think, 2nd in the league. I mean, this team is really, really good on all angles. Defensively, they're not super sharp, but they're competent enough where they can win ball games. We saw that last year. We're going to see that again this year. That team should have been in the NFC Championship game, but a safety blew a coverage on Stephon Diggs. So, look, I think this New Orleans team is going to be unstoppable come playoff time with a mixture of experience and a mixture of just pure talent. And I think Drew Brees, if this does become his last season, I think he goes out on top. I've said that since day one of the season, so I'd like to stick by it. I don't see anybody touching this New Orleans team in the playoffs, though there are good options. Seattle's one of them, but I think New Orleans is just too darn good to get knocked off in the playoffs. That's Michael Bollig. Michael, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
It was a blast. You guys can vote for this one. Who do you think won? Was it Michael, the guy in the green jersey? The crowd's going wild.
Merry Christmas, guys. Merry Christmas in the color rush jersey.
Or was it me? You can click the purple button if you're on mobile, or if you're on your computer, it'll pop up. So make sure you vote. Until then, we'll see you Monday on Fight Night.
Remember, 12th man.